Hi guys, it is a pleasant spring day here in the end times in Babylon of South Austin, Texas, and I have got to get out of here, get back up on my roof, play my part in the global industrial economy. But it is Wednesday morning, April 1st, 2015, April Fool's Day. So this is Wednesday's the day I bring you my climate change meltdown roundup rant, where I go on the pages of the mainstream media, this case Yahoo News, to see how this planet is descending into a burning lake of fire while I'm crawling around on a roof. Alright, since it is April Fool's Day, there is no better way to open a climate change meltdown roundup rant on April Fool's Day than the most unadulterated horseshit climate change story I have read since that historic accord between the U.S. and China, how they're going to save the planet, working together, how they're going to save the planet from climate change. And this is, according to our friend, this is from the French news service, their spin on this story, several versions of this story, from our friends at the International Energy Agency. Say, global CO2 emissions stall in 2014 despite economic growth. Oh no. The batteries are finally dying in my bullshit detector button. I don't believe it. That is the story it took to threaten the batteries in my bullshit detector button. Global CO2 emissions stall in 2014. My ass. Take it away, mainstream media. Global carbon dioxide emissions from the energy sector stalled in 2014. The first time in 40 years during a period of economic growth, the International Energy Agency said on Friday. By far, the main culprit in global warming, carbon dioxide emissions stood at 32.3 billion tons in 2014, unchanged from the previous year, the IEA said.
Bullshit detected. Take precautions.
This is both a very welcome surprise. Yeah, surprise, there's the only true word we've seen yet. This is both a very welcome surprise and a significant one. IEA Chief Economist Faith Birol said, it provides much needed momentum to negotiators preparing to forge a global climate deal in Paris in December. For the first time, greenhouse gas emissions are decoupling from economic growth. The preliminary data suggests that efforts to mitigate climate change may be having a more pronounced effect on emissions than had previously been thought. Close quote.
Bullshit level, DEFCON 5.
All right, I can't stand, let's see. All right, one more quote from this guy, this economist. This gives me even more hope that humankind will be able to work together to combat climate change, the most important threat facing us today. But don't worry, at least IEA's executive director, Maria van der Hoeven, put a little bit of water on the flames of horseshit. Quote, the latest data on emissions are indeed encouraging, but this is no time for complacency, and certainly not the time to use this positive news as an excuse to stall further action, close quote. And this is exactly what it's going to be used as I'll talk about here in a minute. But I apparently am not the only one hitting the bullshit button on this April Fool's story. This story out of my friends at oilprice.com, this long involved story, which I'm going to get more into in my Monday economic meltdown rant, but I'm going to discuss it here too. From oilprice.com by this fellow Kurt Cobb. I wish they had put Kurt's resume here. I know he's got, let's put it this way, he knows a hell of a lot more about this story than some dumb hippie sitting in a made in China chair. And so according to Kurt Cobb, his story, the uncomfortable truth behind flat carbon emissions. Last week we learned that maybe, just maybe, global carbon emissions were flat in 2014, even though the global economy supposedly grew by 3%. As Brad Plumer of Vox, whose work I greatly respect, points out, carbon emissions have moved up almost in lockstep with economic growth for the entire industrial age, except during recessions and 1 year of growth 40 years ago. This is why I use supposedly when referring to the global economic growth number. It's because there is another obvious and plausible explanation for the flat carbon emissions, namely that the global economy did not grow by the stated percentage, that it may have grown only a fraction of that amount or not at all. And anyway, I'm going to talk about this more, as I say, in my economic meltdown rant on Monday. He actually talks about Derrick Jensen showing up in this excellent story. I'm going to put the link on it here. I did want to touch, this is mostly about economic growth. Anyway, there is somewhere in here, this is a long involved story, but somewhere in here he says, I can't get you the exact quote because it would take me forever to find it again. He mentioned somewhere in here, just almost as an aside, the other plausible explanation in here. I wish to hell he had talked about it more, and that's this unadulterated. Okay, here we go. It is all. This is his one sentence he devotes to this. It is also possible that estimates of carbon emissions are too low. Plumer cites the notoriously unreliable Chinese emission numbers as one reason to be skeptical. And what he's mentioning here is the reason I am hitting the bullshit button, although this economic growth one's a good idea too. It's horse shit. That once again, this is the UN and the IEA and all these people are basing these conclusions on self-reporting by the different countries in the UN. I don't believe a goddamn word coming out of Barack Obama's mouth for our own country. I sure as shit don't believe one goddamn word coming out of the Chinese government. We are trusting them to talk about the Chinese government claiming that their emissions are flatlining in 2014. Come on, people.
Now, that ain't even bullshit. That's horseshit.
I just went over this in a deforestation rant last week, where all of these countries have been claiming that they're winning the battle on deforestation, and they're self-reporting. It is the fox guarding the hen house. It's a bunch of lying sacks of shit patting themselves on the back. What happened with the deforestation, all those lying sacks of shit, well, the satellite data has come out to point out what goddamn lying sacks of shit are. Sitting there talking that we have decreased deforestation on this planet by 25% since the year 2000, when in fact the data show that we have actually increased it by 63%. And you know, and what's true for the deforestation is true for these unadulterated horseshit, self-reporting fox guarding the hen house. I don't believe this shit for 1 second. I don't believe it. Kurt Cobb doesn't believe it. Anyway, I will get back to this story on Monday. Okay, and of course the big story yesterday is this other horseshit. Might as well be April Fools about yesterday was the deadline for all of these countries to report to the UN exactly how they plan to cut emissions, how much and how. And so this is for Barack Obama. U.S. offer for climate treaty up to 28% emissions cut. Although he's already talked about this before. This is just, anyway, dotting the I's and crossing to the T's. In a highly anticipated announcement, the United States will offer a roughly 28% emissions cut as its contribution to a major global climate treaty nearing the final stages of negotiation. Yes, although the goal of 26 to 28% by 2025 isn't new, the U.S. proposal has drawn intense interest from the vast majority of countries that have yet to announce how deeply they will pledge to cut greenhouse gas emissions as part of the treaty. So, and of course, what metrics the U.S. will use to back up their claim is not yet clear. The U.S. is expected to focus on the fact that the Obama administration has ramped up the rate of emissions. Anyway, guys, I'll put the link to this horseshit. So here we have Barack Obama, and this is already a joke. If the U.S. and the rest of the planet cut their emissions by 28%, that just means it'll take a few more years before the planet descends into a burning lake of fire. So let's get that clear. That is unadulterated. It's not enough to save the planet. It is barely scratching the surface. But even this token little effort by this planet eater, Barack Obama, the biggest pitchman for the fossil fuel industry, even when he does, take some little limp dick, lame duck attempt to do a goddamn thing about it, what do you have from the other side? Well, how about this one from Reuters News? Republicans warn the world that Obama UN plan could be undone. Here I am. Here's your old eco-Nazi sounding like goddamn Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky. Okay, Reuters News. The Obama administration's plan for UN climate change talks encountered swift opposition after its release on Tuesday, with Republican leaders warning other countries to, quote, proceed with caution in negotiations with Washington because any deal could be later undone. So Reuters is saying that the U.S. plans to meet these targets by using a host of existing laws and executive actions targeting power plants, vehicles, oil and gas production, and buildings. But Republican critics say the administration lacks the political and legal backing to commit the United States to an international agreement. And take it away, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. And you notice I'm not going to be reaching for the bullshit button, but because for once, this makes perfect sense. Take it away, Mitch. Quote, considering that 2/3 of the U.S. federal government has not even signed off on the Clean Power Plan and 13 states have already pledged to fight it, our international partners should proceed with caution before entering into a binding, unattainable deal, close quote. There you go. Elements of the administration's climate policy already face legal challenges. I mentioned this on Monday. On April 16th, the Federal Appeals Court in Washington will hear arguments from 13 states opposed to as yet unfinalized regulations from the Environmental Protection Agency that target emissions in existing power plants. And McConnell's warnings echoed the tone of a March 9th open letter from 47 Republican senators to Iran in which they warned a Republican president would not be bound to honor a nuclear agreement struck by Democrat Obama without congressional approval. And some observers say that resistance to Obama's climate policies leaves foreign governments questioning whether Obama's commitments can last. Exactly. Even if these commitments weren't unadulterated horseshit. Even if they did have a goddamn tooth anywhere in their mouth, the tooth is going to be yanked out by those goddamn climate change denying oil-soaked Republicans. Okay, so how is the U.S. going to reduce carbon emissions? Well, here's a perfect example. A bunch of stories on this. I'm going to touch on two of them. This is Reuters News spin on it. Shell Oil will resume drilling off Alaska coast. Royal Dutch Shell will resume drilling off Alaska after suspending operations for 2 years in the wake of an accident. Shell has been moving oil rigs to Alaska as it awaits the green light from U.S. authorities. It froze operations in 2013 after the grounding of an oil rig in Alaska prompted protests from environmental groups. This is, I don't know who Admiral Robert Papp is. Clearly, Shell and others will resume drilling and exploration off the north slope of Alaska. I think Shell is putting significant resources into this to make sure they have enough people, equipment, resources, redundancy. They should be okay. Yes, Shell should be okay. And right next to that story, also from Reuters, but one day later, U.S. approval moves Shell one step closer to Arctic drilling. This happened yesterday. The U.S. Interior Department on Tuesday upheld a 2008 lease sale in the Chukchi Sea off Alaska, moving Royal Dutch Shell one step closer to returning to oil and gas exploration in the Arctic since it suffered mishaps in the region in 2012. Okay, let's quote our esteemed Interior Secretary and former fracker Sally Jewell. This is Sally Jewell taking care of this country and doing her part to reduce the United States' contribution towards CO2 emissions. Take it away, Sally Jewell. The Arctic is an important component of the administration's national energy strategy, and we remain committed to taking a thoughtful and balanced approach to oil and gas leasing and exploration offshore Alaska. Close quote.
Warning, bullshit alert.
Yes, and in case you forgot, Shell lost control of a massive oil rig in 2012, which ran aground. But in anticipation of returning to the region for the first time since then, Shell has already moved rigs to Alaska. Yep. And enough of the North Pole for anybody who has missed my last 2 weeks climate change roundup rants. This is Live Science coming in with the same story I've already mentioned, so I'll just mention it briefly here. For the third week in a row, anybody failing to understand this. Live Science. Antarctica's ice shelves are thinning fast. Antarctica's floating ice collar is quickly disappearing in the west. In the Bellinghausen and Amundsen Seas, two of West Antarctica's melting hotspots, some ice shelves have lost 18% of their thickness in the past decade. The most dramatic shrinkage lost ice at an average rate of about 118 feet. 118 feet per decade in the past 18 years. At that rate, the entire Western Antarctic ice shelf could disappear within a century. Yep. Anyway, I think we get the picture. For anybody who is not a climate change denier. But anyway, guys, I got to get out of here and get back on that goddamn roof. So I'm going to wrap up this week's April Fool's edition climate change meltdown roundup rant about carbon emissions flatlining while the global economy grows. Jesus, the level of bullshit out there. I can't take it anymore, guys. Bye, guys.